So I think we're ready. So good afternoon and welcome to OVMAE's book presentation series. My name is Manuel Avila Santiago. I'm an associate professor of communication and culture at the College of Integrated Science and Arts. And I'm also director for the Office for Veterans of Military Academic Engagement. Joining me today for the presentation is my colleague, public historian and OVMAE associate director, Nancy Ballet. Today's book presentation is very important to us because our author is not only an essential part of Arizona State University, he's also a colleague and an inspiration to what we do at OVMAE. Our office goal is to bridge the veteran and civilian cultures through teaching and community engagement, and today's author is the embodiment of that. Shawn Banzhaf currently serves as a senior military advocate for Arizona State University, a senior trainer and consultant for veteran and military affiliated persons at Culturally Intelligent and Consulting, and as board member of First Page in Colorado, an organization that helps the children of veterans with trauma. He formerly served as a police surgeon, associate pastor, university campus minister, and is a retired platoon surgeon from the U.S. Army National Guard, which included a 12-month combat tour in support of Operation Iraq Freedom. He's also a certified practitioner of the Enneagram personality profiles. He got certified today, right, Shawn?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Shawn lives with his wife Jody in the Tempe area and have 2 adult children and 4 grandchildren. It is my honor to introduce to you the author of The 5 L's, a practical guide for helping loved ones heal after trauma. Shawn, the word is yours.
Thank you, Manu, Nancy, and for everybody that showed up today. It humbles me every time people take time out of their day to pay attention to anything that I might have to say. So Manu and Nancy have asked me if I do a small reading from the 5 L's, and I've chosen this small snippet out of chapter 4. It's the lesson chapter. It's one of the L's. If you haven't purchased the book or you don't know what we're talking about, I hope to teach you a little bit about that today. But if you just honor me with a little bit more of your time, I'll read. It was hot out that day. The sun was beating down, and the sounds of the crowd that surrounded me were both safe and yet unsettling. I sat watching people move to and fro, weaving in and out of conversation, all without a care in the world. We were all sitting around in our trusty lawn chairs, eating the traditional American cuisine of burgers and hot dogs with ice-cold sodas in hand. The church had some patriotic banners flitting on the fence close by. I found it odd that everybody appeared unaware of the busy movement going on around them and all the loud bangs that enveloped the air. The echoing cracks and booms seemed to roll off the crowd as if they weren't even heard. How can they do this? How is it they're not flinching, and why aren't they looking around in every direction trying to figure out what's up? Perhaps, I thought, I just need to get away from this and hit the mobile latrine in the parking lot. Yes, that will do. I'll get my bearings there while ridding myself of a few of these sodas at the same time. It was Nebraska on July 4th. So it was particularly dense and humid heat wave. I was sweating bullets, and while I was standing in the porta-john, I began to feel transported to Iraq. The sweltering heat, tight space, and familiar dank smell of the latrine emanating from below was a familiar experience downrange in Iraq. And since the bathroom is often a place of pause and reflection, in my mind I began recalling all kinds of memories about this and that, but especially memories of wanting to be home and away from all this madness of war. And then, bang, pop, pop, pop. My body dropped to the floor. I stopped breathing and then began breathing rapidly. The heart inside my chest doubled its rate, pounding like a drum as fresh adrenaline coursed through my veins. My eyes flitted back and forth frantically, and I instinctively reached for my weapon, only to find I didn't have one. Where are the shots coming from? Where's the nearest defense? How long should I stay here before running out for better cover? My mind raced through a series of options in a matter of seconds that seemed like an eternity. I had to survive whatever this was. And then, moments later, it hit me. I wasn't in Al Taqaeda. I wasn't hearing small arms fire. I wasn't even in danger. I was in my own church parking lot, and Independence Day fireworks were being set off by kids from the youth ministry. Knowing this, however, obviously didn't prevent me from nearly melting down. My body was completely arrested. I was once again confronted with the fact that when the alarm bell of the emotional brain keeps signaling that you are in danger, no amount of insight will silence it. After pulling myself back together and taking a few controlled breaths, I walked out cautiously. I remained on high alert, even though I could see with my own eyes where I was and what was going on. It didn't matter. My brain and body had been trained over the course of 15 months to respond to perceived threats in a certain way. I walked across the lot and finally found Jody. She was sitting and talking to friends. She looked up and knew right away that something wasn't right. She stood up, called for our kids, and politely excused us from the gathering. "Let's go home, babe." In that moment, those were the most powerful words ever spoken to this broken soldier. It was as if the storm clouds had cleared in my mind. My heart rate began to stabilize and my breath returned to normal. I got in the car and we went home. And though that evening was not unicorns and rainbows because the fireworks burst on, I was able to at least find solace in my sanctuary called home. I had survived the day. Thank you. Sorry. I told you, it gets me every time. I can't read it without doing it.
Thank you for sharing that with us. It's definitely very moving, and it gets me too. And I share that feeling with you. It's a very powerful book. It's a beautiful book, and I recommend everyone to give themselves an opportunity to learn so much from you, but also how you apply knowledge, which I think is such an important thing and such a powerful thing. I know Nancy have a couple of questions about specific aspects of the model that you created. We don't want to give a lot of information because I feel it's really important for people to engage and came to their own conclusions and have their engagement with the model that you're proposing here. But Nancy, I defer to you.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Shawn. That's a really moving story. We're in that porta john with you. Really get a sense that that's what it feels like, and you're a really fortunate man to have Jody right by your side. I want to honor her and her ability to look at you and know, let's go home, babe. That really brings tears to my eyes as much as your trauma, if not more.
Yeah.
So before we get into the actual 5 L's and how you've characterized that, that practical set of guidelines, just talk to us a little bit about your motivations for writing this.
Sure.
And how you went about researching how you would write it, the kind of help you got to write it and publish it.
Absolutely. Before I get into that, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize my co-author, Jamin Hubner, his wife Jessica, and my wife, of course, for all of their help and guidance. As all of you can see, the cover of the book means a lot to me, and that's thanks to Jamin and so much of the research and the things that went into the book. Jamin, who has a PhD and he's super intelligent, and I'm so glad that he's my friend, and he motivated me to actually believe that I could write a book. He's a published author as well, and so where did the 5 L's stem from? It's important to know it stems from my almost lack of ability to help student veterans at ASU. Here I was one day, the senior military advocate, and I was sitting across the table listening to this student named Zach, who happens to be my son's name. But I'm listening to this young student, and he's a Marine, just got out, diagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder. And he's laying all this out to me across the table. And I'm listening to him, and I began to think to myself, I don't know how to help this kid. you know, and then it hit me. I'm the senior military advocate. If I don't know how to help this student, how are staff and faculty across the university going to help this student who is diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder? And I, you know, you heard that I'm a former pastor, and you know, so personally, I prayed and I asked God, I need help. And it was as if 5 L's were dumped into my head. Do these 5 things and do them in this order, and you'll be able to help people who have post-traumatic stress disorder. So I wrote them down as they were given to me. And I was, then I began to see how Jody, my lovely wife, actually did these things for me when I came home from war. And that was really the genesis of the 5 L's. And I'm a pretty practical dude. I try to take a bunch of stuff and put it together and make it so you can understand it no matter who you are. And if I can continue just a little bit, after I had written these 5 L's down, I wrote a LinkedIn article. And President Crow had sent out this email to all staff and faculty, and he had talked about the dangers of the suicide epidemic across universities, and we needed to do something about it. And I had just recently written that LinkedIn article, and I said, well, I have a way. And so I wrote President Crow back, and I also wrote General Freakley, who's the military advisor for President Crow, and he actually got back to me. And so, as stunned as I was General Freakley wants to talk to me, and he set up an appointment. And I laid this out to him, and I owe him a debt of gratitude, and I want to recognize him. He told me, he says, "This is genius," he said. "You've taken this complex thing, but you've boiled it down to simplicity, and that's the art of true genius. You should let people know about this." And so that's what I've been doing ever since. And then I wrote the book. So there you go.
So I have a question before Nancy,
Sure.
and it's about the book cover. And for those of you who are curious about the book cover, is behind us, is our background. I want to say thank you to the CISA team for creating this beautiful promotion for our event today.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you very much. Can you tell us about, because I mean, a lot of people pick their books because of that visual component and that visual connection to it. I have to say, and I was sharing that with you before, I got really moved when I saw that picture. There's a lot of emotion come from it. So can you explain a little bit on that?
Absolutely. So my good friend Jamin, he said, here I got some, you know, he's a photographer as well. Of course, he's multifaceted, multi-talented. And he says, if you like one of these photos that I've taken, we could use it if you want it. And so my wife and I were going through the photos, and there were many beautiful images. And then my eyes just stuck on that photo. And I sent back a message. I like this one. He says, you like that one? I said, I love this one. Why? And so Nancy, if you could just move a little bit so that everybody could see it. So the model in this happens to be a good friend of mine and Jamin's wife, and her name is Jessica. And Jessica is actually a psychiatrist, funny enough. And but she started out being in me and Jody's ministry, and we met her as a young college student. Walked through a lot of trials and tribulations together. But the cover itself, the shawl wrapped around Jessica, meant something to me. Often when we're full of trauma, we just need that blanket around us. And those can be our friends, our family, or even literally a blanket. I think sometimes people put off the simplicity when it's actually very complex. And then I love the horizon. So even though possibly in this photo you're seeing Jessica, and maybe she's been through some trauma, but the horizon gives hope. And then the colors and the scheme there reminds me a little bit of the Great Plains where I grew up. And so all that together, to me, it really signified what the 5 L's is all about. So yeah, thanks for enjoying that photo. I'm glad that you do.
Let's move on to some questions about the L's, and I'd like to start with one about listening. And Manu and I have talked about this before. You know, we're taught very early on about speaking, and getting our point across, and debating, and all kinds of different communication strategies. Yeah. But in my experience, we're not really ever taught to listen. And I was very curious about. I've heard. People are starting to help us to understand what is attentive listening.
Sure.
But what I loved about what you did in this one chapter was to be incredibly practical about don't be hungry. Put down your media.
Yeah.
Stop fidgeting. Focus. And really practical advice to just at least set yourself up for being able to listen. And if you could just talk about that expression of aerobic listening.
Yeah, so aerobic listening, it's well, I think most people, when you think of aerobics, you think of exercise, do you not? You think of breathing hard and sweating and all of those things. And it takes work. So when somebody says aerobics, you're in for some workout. And so here's the thing that I've really learned over my time, and I say this often, most of the time, especially in America, we listen for the sake of talking. We listen just long enough so that we can yak, instead of listening for the sake of listening. Aerobic listening, and I describe it in the book, but it's using all of the different muscles in our body to listen. Most of us have heard of active listening. I think that's one of those things, like lean in, point your ear your best ear towards them. I talk about in the book, in the Army, they teach you to stand at ease. Standing at ease, you might think, well, that's standing easy, but actually it's a modified position of attention. So standing at attention and then standing at ease, you get to put your hands behind your back, but what you do is you watch the speaker with your head. And if they're walking in front of you, you move your head with them because they know your eyes are part of your ears. So paying attention with all of your senses. Have you ever walked into a place and you smelled something that reminded you of something? Yeah, smelling's this very visceral sense that we have. What if you paid attention so much that you smelled everything in the room when you were listening? Guess what might happen? It might draw you back to the situation. You'll remember things that you wouldn't have remembered before. So controlling your breathing when you're listening. In combat, they talk about what's called combat breathing. And you're breathing just enough so that you can continue to function and use your motor skills the appropriate way. There's a way to calm yourself and breathe so that you can accomplish a mission. I'm talking about this kind of listening when somebody wants to share something with you. Like, I think I say it in the book, have you ever watched the words form on the lips of the person talking? Like, if you paid attention like that, it gets into some work. So listening for me has become this art form that I'm trying to teach other people. And I kind of spell it out in the book, Nancy. And I hope that you're listening to me. And I hope everybody's listening to me because somebody's depending on you to listen to them just like you're listening to me right now. Mm-hmm.
I love that suggestion of actually watching the lips.
Mm-hmm.
I might have missed that in the book.
It's kind of intimate.
Said that.
It's pretty intimate. The intimacy of eating food together. Have you ever thought about that? You're cramming stuff in your gut, right? And you're sitting within a few feet of one another. I think we've lost a lot of that during the pandemic, obviously, but it's this intimate space because we're looking at each other directly in our faces as we're eating. So it's intimate.
Mm.
And I have a question related to that because it reminds me of something. Our relationship, I'm a professor, and when I'm in the classroom, we are talking, but we also listen to our students, and we listen to our students in our office hours as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking that if we pay more attention to that listening, as you are suggesting and encouraging us to do, we will notice things that probably they would not even tell us, right? Looking
Yeah.
at those nonverbal cues, etc.
Mhm.
So I was thinking about your model and how we can apply your model in our classrooms, while becoming allies. I think that notion of ally is really powerful, and I think that we should do a better job as professors, as scholars, as
Mhm.
academic advisors, into becoming allies for people who are going through PTSD situations, and they are not telling us, for example, but we, in that act of listening, are getting the cues.
Yeah.
So, how would you apply the model into the classroom?
Well, I want to set some foundation here. I learned something it's so beautiful this past couple of weeks during my Enneagram certification about our intelligence centers. So almost everybody knows that we use this, we think with this, and we have all of these neurons in our head. But did you know you have as many neurons in your heart as you have in your head? Did you know you have as many neurons in your gut, which is your other center, as you do in your head? I think, especially, we work in higher education, all of us sitting here, and we know we use this a lot. I'm not a professor or a scholar. However, in my position, I use my brain a lot. But what I began to realize is that, am I tapping into all the intelligence that's in my heart, in my gut? Is something telling me in my gut that I should or should not do something, right? So if I have these three centers of intelligence, I think that that's a good foundation for when you're leading a class. Okay, so you already, I'm just going to use you, Manu. You already are based in your level of intelligence because you're an associate professor. You know the material like the back of your hand, if you will. So you could maybe even shut that off a little bit and begin to use this in the classroom. So where this whole thing starts for me is love. You read in the book, it's the first chapter. It's about a third of the whole book. I speak on love for almost that much of it, because without it, I don't believe you'll listen the way you could, or learn the way you could, or you wouldn't lessen trauma the way you could. You wouldn't lead the way you could unless you first start to love. So I'm not telling everybody how to run your class here, but when the student walks in, when all the students walk in, and I can't wait for that moment in the fall, and I'm sure a lot of you can't either. When they walk in, you have to consciously choose that you're going to love them. And I say this a lot in my training: don't love them how you would lose your job at the university, but love them with this thing, this phileo love, this brotherly love. If you decide to do that already, I can almost guarantee you that you're going to be listening better. I can almost guarantee you're going to learn what's going on in their lives better, just because you chose first to love. And then, the whole thing about listening aerobically. If you actually, in your classroom, listen aerobically, you'll find things out that you didn't know before. I use this a lot, and I think Michelle's watching here today. She's my supervisor. And I talk about how when we introduce ourselves, Michelle, she really doesn't tell much of a story about herself. She says this one little statement: I was a combat medic. And then she says a couple more sentences, and she doesn't talk about anything else. But if you listen the way I teach you in the book here, you'll actually pick up on that script. She could just say, I was a medic in the Army. But what does she choose to say in that moment? That she's a combat medic. Why did she choose to use those words? Semantics are important. And as we speak, picking up on those cues, Manu, I think really could help any professor begin to kind of lay this framework out and help the students that are actually reaching out with nonverbal cues and semantics. So yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch we could talk about, but yeah.
We definitely have to do a better job at that. And one of the connecting threads in your book is the notion of empathy. And you talk a lot about empathy in the book, but you also talk about radical empathy, which I think is a really powerful concept. Could you explain the difference between the two of them?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm pretty practical, right? Empathy is, I think, something that we're all trying to get on the empathetic bandwagon. Radical empathy is actually vulnerability on your part. So it's one thing to be empathetic and say, well, I'm putting myself in their shoes, and you have this thought here that you're doing that. But when I want to talk about radical empathy, it's actually opening myself up to possibly the hurt and the trauma somebody else has walked through. That can be scary, and a lot of people don't like to go there. I was talking to my dad the first week that we published the book, and I was talking to my mom and dad on the phone. I had them on speakerphone, and my dad had read the introduction, and he didn't tell me exactly how far he had read, but I could tell that he had been through the listen. He'd been through love and listen, because he said, Shawn, this is way harder than the title says it should be. I said, what do you mean, Dad? He said, well, like, to actually love somebody that much, to actually make a conscious decision, that's not easy. He said, and then listening to somebody like that, he said, I've never really thought about it, but most people do just kind of listen for the sake of talking. When I talk about radical empathy, I'm talking about like opening yourself up to actually feel the words that somebody's speaking to you, to actually feel somewhere deep inside of you the trauma that person is sharing with you. Because if you can get to that space, that changes the whole conversation. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not even saying I do it the best, but I think it helps people when we go to that level with them. So I challenge everybody. I challenge myself every day. Can I be radically empathetic? When my wife comes to me with something, when my friends come to me with something, am I vulnerable enough to go there with them? I don't know. I hope so.
Before going any further, I would like to share with you a comment that someone sent on the Q&A box. It's not a question. It's just like a person that says, I just want to thank you, in caps, for the impact you have on others for the better, the knowledge you share, especially through experience. Blessings to you always. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Nancy, you have a couple of other
Sure. Yeah, I think we'll move on to the learning, the third L. So World War II and Korean War veterans, and even Vietnam War veterans, were mostly not invited to share their experiences. And we all know people who are practically on their deathbed who finally the family begins to ask them, or they begin to volunteer it. And really, they came home and they were just expected to get on with it. But that had a really negative effect, not only on them, but on all of society, their families and all of society. So in a way, we're kind of making up for that. And we want to be there and listening for, post 9/11 veterans in particular. But sometimes there might be a recognition that even with your radical empathy and your very, very, your embodied empathy and your really good listening skills, it's beyond your non-professional ability to do much more than the conversation that you're having.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about, how you begin to recognize that a person, even though they've begun to open up and you've done your best, it may be time to help them to see that they could use some professional help to keep moving on in their recognizing their vulnerability, becoming more comfortable with it, and taking the next steps.
Right. Well, I think that's important as you read the book too, this is practical, and you're maybe not the professional that should be helping them. there comes a time, especially if someone has, like our World War II vets and our Vietnam vets and our Korean War vets, the ones that um, there's this thing about when you're a soldier and you're a warrior, you've been into battle, that opening up about these things is considered weak. And I tell this, I don't know if I tell the story in the book, but my grandpa, who was at Normandy, I didn't know that until after he passed away, and my grandma told me. I knew he was in World War II, and when I was a young kid, I would say, Grandpa, tell me about your time in war. We were a military family. I could trace it all the way back to the Revolutionary War, so I wanted to join one day. I knew I did, and I would ask my grandpa, and he would tell me this statement: Shawn, the girls in Paris were sure pretty. That's all I ever, when I thought about World War II, and here this man had been through hell. And I've often thought about it because so many of us are unwilling to share. And there's for a lot of reasons. It's weak, or it's, maybe you're a woman and you've been through combat and you have all these other things that you don't want to share because people will think differently of you. And I guess my whole point there, Nancy, is that it's our job as the people who decided to love them to do everything we can to listen and learn. I say this often too. Okay, so maybe they only shared a little bit. Then if you love me enough, get online. We got the Googleverse. You can find so many things out. Like if I just told you I was in Iraq 06, 07, and that's all I told you, you could go and find out that's when we were right in the middle of the crap. That's when all the IEDs were blowing up, and that's when troops were getting killed and the big surge of troops had to go in. You could learn all of that without me even saying a word, right? So then when you see me and I flinch when something happens, you've learned something about me without me even being able to speak about it. You can learn this stuff out there. So let's say you've learned that about me and you're like, Shawn, I just don't know how I can help you. It's okay. Listen, it's okay that you can't fix everybody. I'm not asking you to fix anybody. Actually, I'm just asking you to be there for people and take the opportunity to say, Shawn, I love you. And because I love you, let's get you help together. Let's walk this out together. I'll take you there. Whatever it is. And, there's different ways to learn, Nancy. I don't have to just spill all my guts, but you can learn about me because you care enough about me to do so. So yeah, anyway, I don't know if that answered your question, but I rambled enough.
For Nancy, I want to share a comment that some of the attendees are sharing here. This is from Mariana Grohowski, and she's the awesome editor of the Veteran Studies Journal and our colleague. She said, thank you very much for sharing your research with all of us. I will definitely be picking up a copy of your book. Thank you, Manu and Nancy, for the invitation. Thank you, Mariana, for attending. Thank you, Mariana. You here.
Thank you.
How about a little bit about Van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score that you reference, and that concept of stuck in the on position or the off position, and how veterans overcome the pressure to keep quiet about their experience.
I'm sorry, there. Can you see me? I was blurring out. So here's the deal. Just like the moment that I read to you of being in the Porta-John, that was July 4th, and I had got back from Iraq in November. So you just tick off a few months there, and I am still in this orange space in my life. Like how can I unplug from that? And if I can share just a little bit, I had almost a meltdown 13 years after I came home from Iraq. Well, I did have a meltdown. You can talk to Jody about it. And I think I read about it in the book. Like I lost it because of a car honking their horn and driving up on me. The body does keep score. That's why in law enforcement and firefighting, they have critical incident debriefings to help walk you back down. But it, it never really goes away. So here's something to everybody that's listening. If you know somebody that is in any of those kinds of things, and it doesn't just have to be that, but let's say that you were sexually abused when you were a kid, the body keeps score. That stays with you for your whole life. So there's, I always say there was pre-war Shawn and post-war Shawn. I am not the same person I was before I went to war. No matter how much help I've got, no matter how much these 5Ls have helped me, I won't ever be pre-war Shawn. The body keeps all the score. My mind, things still affect me, and you just need to know that about somebody that's been traumatized. There is help, and there's trauma-informed care, and there's things you can do to help. Just realize it's not like one day they'll wake up and go, oh, I don't even remember going to war, or oh, I don't even remember being abused when I was a kid. It doesn't just go away. That's as practical as I can put it for you, Nancy. So with that being said, take the burden off your shoulders trying to fix people all the way fixed. Okay, we're not a car, like you can't take out my memories and put back new memories. I'm always going to have them. So don't burden yourself with trying to heal everybody. So, yeah.
That brings up another question that I always have, and that is about, I think everybody has trauma in their lives. I think after the pandemic, we should be asking each other, how you doing? And really, really be asking, how you doing? Because it's probably now that we're coming out of it that we can really see what it's cost us, personally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I also am aware there's a kind of a hierarchy, and when we talk about trauma and moral injury, I do put at the summit a combat veterans experience, as opposed to my personal experience, having not been in war and not been in combat.
Sure.
So just talk with us a little bit about respecting that kind of hierarchy, because we really have learned from the combat veteran experience, even, what is PTSD and what is moral injury, but it has seeped out and helped the rest of society recognize, yes, there's a hierarchy, but we're all suffering in a way.
Yeah.
And
I'm really hoping, Nancy, with this book, to normalize trauma. People do make it hierarchical, and I get that. They offer veterans this what's called moral authority, and for good reason. And I'm not negating that for anyone. The thing is that on 100 occasions I went outside the wire, and there was a possibility it would be the last one. And when you have to actually live in that, I mean, has anybody in this little audience ever got their laptop out and said their goodbye video to their family and recorded it just in case? When we lost one of our troops over there, it hit me like, wow, war is really the first guy that we lost. Is this? I need to let my wife and my kids know that I love them. And I went back and pushed the button on, recorded myself just saying, Jody, if you're listening to this, have you ever done that before? Right. So there is a certain moral authority that's given to that type of thing, because we have combat veterans in particular have faced death on multiple occasions. But can I tell you something? A little boy that was 7 years old that reported to me when I was a cop that his stepdad had been sexually molesting him for a couple of years. He faced in his own mind, his little 7-year-old mind, death. You think about the the woman that is trafficked from one country to another, faces death every day. There are I wish I could just hug the whole world, because there's so much hopelessness, and the pandemic just stacked onto that. All of us have been through some sort of trauma. This panel right here of 3 people, I can almost guarantee you all 3 of us have experienced trauma. That's 100% of the panel. And if I looked on who's watching here today, I can almost guarantee you of the, I think it's the adverse childhood experience test. If you ever take the ACE test, I can almost guarantee you that 50% almost have experienced at least one of those horrible traumas as a kid. If veterans can lead the way in this through allowing people like yourself to talk to us about PTSD and learn about the trauma that we faced in combat, if that can help everyday Mr. and Mrs., they, them, theirs, if we can do that, that's what I want to do. I want to be that person on the cutting edge of trauma informed, and I want people to come along with me, because we're counting on one another. That's what I think about. Like, you're counting on me and I'm counting on you, because one day I'll have a bad day and one day you'll have a bad day. And when I say, Nancy, how you doing? I want to actually care how you're doing. One of my biggest pet peeves is like, how you doing, Shawn? Anything going on in your life? And then I start jabbering, because I do, and then you don't pay attention to what I'm saying. It's this human connection is the thing. This is how we can get through things together. So I hope that we can help through the use of the 5 L's.
Mm. Yeah. One other thing, just on lead, I love the way you characterize bringing order to chaos, and recognizing that, you know, there's a lot of turmoil going on, and just to be there to kind of help stabilize, allow it to be there and not be the solution for it, but just to not be in it alone, and to be able to express it without feeling somebody's going to tell you, oh yeah, I had that too, or that happened to my neighbor, I'll tell you this, and I'll tell you that. No, or I'll tell you what you need to do about it. But just that sense of bringing some order to that instability and the chaos.
Yeah. People ask me what's PTSD like, and I always try to break it down Barney style, as simple as I can go. The way I used to handle stress was ordered. So if somebody snuck up behind me and said, boo, I might go, huh, like you would. The way I handle stress after war is no longer ordered. It's disordered. Things that didn't used to startle me now startle me. The way you handle stress is different than I handle stress now because of what happened to me. So I always think about post-traumatic stress disorder. It's disordered, the way I handle my stressors now. Because the body does keep score. I'm always going to be in this certain level that maybe you're not. So it's disordered. That's when I talk about leading. Actually, you know, I'm taking my classes to get my master's in sociology here at Arizona State. And we had to come up with this big list about the greatest leadership attributes. And I was the one keeping all of those and putting them in the slide for our group. And they were all great. You know, they're empathetic, inclusive, just different ones that you would know corporately, what makes a good leader. And I was thinking about combat. The greatest leaders I've ever known brought order to chaos. If you can help lead somebody who's struggling with trauma, remember, it's disordered the way they handle it. So what can you do to bring order then to their chaos? That's actually a very practical thing you could do. And if you're a teacher in the classroom, I speak about this in my lesson chapter. If the chaos is because they're currently sitting in the front of the room and they have people to their back, and all of a sudden things start tripping them, you can bring order to their chaos by saying, I know that you probably didn't go to the DRC and get this yet, but I see this in you because I love you and I've been listening to you. Let's just take you to the back of the class and let you sit there. Do you know how powerful that is? It's, you know what it is, Nancy? Let's go home, babe.
Mhm.
Like, so powerful to be able to bring order to that person's chaos, Manu. Like when they're in your classroom and you've felt all these things, they'll love you forever for doing it. Honestly, you know, I'll go to my grave loving my wife as hard as I can with as much radical empathy and crazy love because she did that for me, you know, and I feel like we all can step in and bring order to people's chaos. So, yeah.
Shawn, I want to say something that I mean, I've been hearing you and you're creating that blanket that it's in that picture, you know, you're creating that for so many people. And I had the opportunity to read one of the reviews of your book here, and I would like to share it with the audience because I think it's really powerful.
Sure.
And it's a review that came actually 2 days ago. And it says this book is a must-have. If you have or known someone who has experienced any form of trauma, this book will open your eyes to a whole different perspective. I believe in the five L. I believe the 5 L's hits different because it's not crazy scientific jabber being spewed at you. It is personal experience, it's vulnerability. Personally, I plan on sharing this with all my friends and family, military affiliated or not. It is it is also such an easy read that has a full spectrum of emotion. I laughed, I cried, I felt frustration, I felt hope, happiness. I highly recommend this book to anyone, and who knows, maybe this can help you identify a friend or loved one who is in need of help but has not been able to ask. So I wanted to share that because I think it's really powerful and it's becoming something global, you know. And I wondered, how do you react to these kind of, you know, reviews and comments? How does that make you feel?
I don't even know. Matthew, you asked me this question. It's the most surreal thing is I don't know that person on Amazon that put that there. Like uh, you know, I was sharing with you this young woman in North Carolina tagged me on her Instagram, said that she was obsessed with my book. And I'm like, how can some girl that I don't know in North Carolina be obsessed with something that I did? And she said that her sister saw the reviews, bought the book. It was on her vanity in the bathroom. So she picked up her sister's copy and then couldn't put it down. You know, like, how does this happen to this dude? That's all. Like, I don't know. I don't even know what to tell you about it. It's really humbling. And, you know, I share it with my wife all the time. And she's like, she can't believe it either. So I'm not the only one. Yeah.
Manu, you're muted.
I'm sorry. We have a comment here from Chelsea Wilkinson, and I would like to share it with you. So I'm gonna scroll this up here. It says, "Thank you for this Zoom. These are subjects I have tried to teach myself by active observation and interactions with my husband and our veteran friends. My husband did 3 tours in convoy security, Iraq, Kuwait, Afghanistan. The concepts of life and death, trauma, and living." Hold on, I'm trying to scroll this. Um, um, Let me see. I'm trying to see the scrolling here. The concepts of life and death, trauma, and living through it, survival skills, and so many more experiences, conversations, body languages, reactions, then putting those experiences into everyday living. It's such an all-encompassing world for vets.
Mm.
Thank you for writing about it with your families and bringing awareness, opening the door to that conversation. It's so important.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome.
I have another question here. This is a more practical question. Is your book on Audible?
It is not. It's my hope this summer before I start my B session classes to get it recorded. I know that I've been asked if I was going to do that, and I do. I want to. I hope to get that done this summer.
Right. And I have a great question from our colleague, the amazing Michelle Loposky. She's asking, what is your goal, dream for this book?
What's my goal after this book? Is that what
For this book, for what you did.
I want to sell 1 million copies, and I want to be on Oprah's book club, and I do, and it's not. I know that sounds almost egotistical, and I've actually struggled with how do I get my book out there without seeming this way. Listen, this helped me. Like it changed my life. People, my wife, and other people close to me, they did these things for me. My kids, um, my son was this way. My daughter was this way, and then their wife, their husband. I just want everybody to know that you have a way to help the people that you love, and it's practical. Like you just think about loving and listening. Like these are pretty natural instincts. All I've done is I've just put words to them to help guide us, and I want as many people to know about it, so as many lives that can be changed happens. That's my dream for this book.
And Leticia Vidana is asking if there is going to be a part two for the book.
There is. I've started writing it. I started the manuscript. It's called the Return of the 5 Ls, Practically Loving Me. So it's taking the 5 Ls and flipping them over towards yourself. You start with the lead chapter and you go back to love. So the thing is that when you're traumatized, whatever that event was or whatever that person that traumatized you, they took your love away for yourself. Like you've lost that love and feeling. And I know, and I wanted to, like, how can I find this love for me? Like this post-war Shawn, how can I again love me like I loved me before war, you know? And if I'm feeling that way, other people that have been traumatized, maybe they don't love themselves either. And so it's taking those 5 Ls and just a brief, it's leading yourself. What does that mean? That means, first of all, taking back whatever that person that traumatized you and took that love, you lead yourself and bring order to your chaos. And you take that love back. And then guess what you do? You start to lessen the things that continue this trauma. It might be getting rid of a relationship. It might be quitting that job that's traumatizing you. I don't know what it is, but you have to do what you can to lessen the trauma in your life. And then, you start to learn, who is this new me? Now that I've taken control back from the traumatizer, now that I've moved some chess pieces in my life, I've got to learn who I am. And part of that is listening to yourself again. And then eventually, my hope is that you find that self-love. So yes, the Return of the 5 Ls, I'm hoping to publish it in 2022. We'll see if I get to it, but that's my dream. And I have another book that I'm going to be co-publishing, hopefully with my good friend Moises. He and I want to write a cookbook together.
Oh.
And the whole thought process about the cookbook is Moises is Hispanic heritage and I'm a white heritage. And what we've talked about this with Michelle and my wife, Jody, over a couple of beers at the Wilderness. We talked about how can we do something that brings cultures together again? How can we do something that brings generations together again? If you look out in the world right now, you have a breakage in culture, you have a breakage in generation. So we're going to take food, because who doesn't love food? He's going to do a recipe a month. I'm going to do a recipe a month. And we're going to call it the monthly Familia. And we're each going to have a recipe a month. And we're going to talk about what does that mean to us culturally? What's it mean to us in our generation? And then at the end of the book, and we're excited about this, the people that we love in our life, we're going to have them submit their recipe so it can be published. And so we're going to bring my mom's recipes, Moises's mom's recipes. We're going to bring them all into this beautiful book. So we're excited about that. Yeah.
I love that idea, and it's making me hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of emotions triggering here. We have 5 more minutes. I want to encourage people who have questions to submit their questions if they want to. Actually, we got one. Someone is asking, will you have any book signing events in the future? And I think you do, right?
Well, I'm hoping to do some book signing events. I was talking to the bookstore a little while ago. I know that Michelle had talked about doing a book signing. Maybe we can do that at the PTVC and with OVMAE. Maybe we can get together and have a day to do that. I'd love to do it. That's that's one of those things that really gets me too, is to be able to sign somebody's book. So yeah, be on the lookout, I guess.
I'm going to be sharing the link for your website for those who are interested in buying the book. I'm not sure, Nancy, you have more questions or thoughts to finalize?
Yeah, one thing that you brought up at the beginning, Shawn, that I didn't realize, there always seems to be a connection between us, or there seems to be a person out there who's the connection between us. And you met, I'm just going to use the word Zach, but I think I know the particular Zach. And I was really struck when I met him. And I also had the feeling of, this is a really special young man. And I just loved him, and I wanted him to go on Huts for Vets.
Yeah.
But we couldn't pull it off. No. And I might have sent him to you. Looking back, when you said you sat across from him and you said to yourself, I'm not sure, what can I do here? And then it came to you.
Yeah.
What if, Zach too came into your office now? I know you would employ the 5 L's, yeah. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Not sure exactly what the question is there, but it's something about meeting these special people that they actually do need something.
Yeah.
And in Zach's case, I think he needed some understanding of how his memory was not working and his learning, and his reading and his retention, and going to Karen Gallagher to do some traumatic brain injury studies was really helpful. But how do you think you would respond to Zach?
Yeah.
Now. Well,
with much more confidence. I think that's always important too. If we're equipped well, soldiers don't go to war without training. You shouldn't go into these situations without some sort of training. And that's kind of what the 5 L's has done for me. It's given me this framework to say, okay, I'm going to follow this. I'm going to decide right away that I'm going to love this person. So I'm not going to be too busy with all this other stuff I got going on in my life. This new Zach 2 walks into my office. Everything else is just going to go away for that moment. And I'm actually going to love him. And then guess what is going to be so beautiful? So often, to bring at the very end, the leading part, the chaos begins to get order right away. And we could actually get to the bottom of some things that maybe we never could before. That's the whole thing about employing the 5 L's. It gives me the confidence now to go, okay, I'm actually going to listen to you. Like I've never listened to another human being in my life. Like if you could go into something like that, that's going to give you confidence to learn. Imagine if all your students listen to you, Manu, like that, just from, out in the bleachers. If they listen to you the way they wouldn't even need a book because they would have learned it all from you, So I think confidence is the big thing, Nancy, that I'd be able to go into that situation knowing that I at least have something to employ.
The first time I heard the expression trauma-informed, well, there's trauma-informed care, but the first time I heard the expression trauma-informed teaching, I was really, really intrigued. And it was by a friend and a colleague who teaches English as a second language in California.
Okay.
And she's developed a program assuming that everyone who's trying to learn English has just come through some sort of traumatic experience in their immigration status.
Yeah.
And it's how it all happens, and they do it together. So it's not just her, leading this teaching, but the students are teaching each other.
Absolutely.
It has a lot to do with family
It
and
does.
food
It
and
does.
confidence and speaking. And I was really, really excited by that. I don't know how that can transfer to a regular, ASU classroom. But if you can assume that everybody's had some form of trauma, especially after the pandemic, and that we're all in it together,
Right.
Coming back this next semester might be a perfect time frame for faculty and advisors and everybody to really practice your 5 L's.
I appreciate that so much, and I hope that they will, honestly. And if, we teach it in the proving grounds for the Pat Tillman Veterans Center. I teach just that framework. So you've listened to a little bit of it today. If you want to hear more about that, you can reach out to us at militaryadvocate@asu.edu, and we can get you hooked up with a proving grounds training, give you some training, which has a little snippet of the 5 L's in there. So we want to be able to help our student veterans, but more than that, they're all human beings, and every human being that you probably come in contact with has been through some sort of trauma. Maybe they don't have the family like I had Jody. Maybe they don't have that in their life, but guess what? You and I can be that.
Mm-hmm.
Do that. That's radical empathy, stepping into that space. So thank you.
And I think this is a perfect way to end our amazing presentation. Thank you very much, Sean. I have to say, thank you for creating this blanket for all of us. Thank you for creating this model that I'm planning to implement in my classroom. I think more than ever, we need this. I'm very privileged to have read your book at this specific moment in time. So thank you for joining us and for accepting doing this. Nancy, you want to add something else?
Again, I also want to thank you. I feel I love to have a Shaw, and I love to have a Shawn. And having them both in my life is really a comfort.
Thank you. Thank you to CISA. Thank you to everybody that came today. I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your day to pay attention and to listen to me. And I just encourage you, love like there is no tomorrow, because we really don't know. So thanks.
Thank you everyone for joining today. Bye-bye.